the road for me is like the lifeblood of what I do. It's the call. I feel like sharing music in live performance in real time with live audiences, like that's fundamentally what I'm designed to do and where I am most filled. So, yeah.
Welcome back to a brand new episode of the Innersleeve Music Podcast, the podcast taking a behind-the-scenes look at all things music. We're your hosts, Cassius Morris and Joe Pacheco, joining you live. What's happening, Joe?
Summer is happening, man. Happy to
That's
be
right.
Summering. What about you?
Good times to be summering indeed. We're definitely enjoying the sunshine over here in Canada. Hoping that our friends over in Quebec, that includes you, Joe, are getting some relief from that smoke. We apologize to our friends over in New York and in the States. Definitely a challenging time.
It was funny to see some of the comments. Like some of those pictures look like Blade Runner out of Blade Runner 2049, which is one of my favorite movies. And then it's like I see people blaming Canadians, Quebecers. I'm like, come on, dude. You know, how much have we had to put up with from other situations? It's a fire, man. You know?
Hashtag blame Canada is the new hashtag we're going to be putting up. No, we're just kidding. We appreciate you guys tuning into this brand new episode 123 of the Innersleeve Music Podcast. Today joined by guest Laila Biali, who's going to be joining us from Toronto, Ontario, Canada, speaking on her latest project, speaking on her CBC radio show, and her overall musical journey. This is really cool, Joe. She made a whole project dedicated to songs from the Great American Songbook. This was her return to her original trademark jazz style. So definitely a really interesting time for Laila, and great to have her on this episode of the show to break it all down.
Yeah, it was great, honest conversation. I loved her honesty on some of those answers, you know, I know just her whole career was interesting. And what was funny is, which is not, you're not going to see in the interview because I've edited it down, but when we got on the phone with her, she asked us all the questions, you know, we're like, hey, wow, you know, it's like so weird.
Very refreshing.
Yeah. So anyways, it shows that she's a radio host, right? And she's probably done these things before, right?
All that coming up later in the show. Music icon Paul McCartney has broken his silence on the world of artificial intelligence when it comes to the world of music and those two spaces meeting. Now, this is very interesting, Joe, because it looks like the artificial intelligence space is going to be featured on the forthcoming, quote, last Beatles record. That's what they're calling this, guys. Which, first of all, Joe, this is sort of surprising to hear in 2023, the last Beatles record.
Yeah, it's exciting news to hear. We just got that that Get Back documentary was fantastic, which in this article, if you do read it, they used a lot of AI to help in the process of that. But like you're wondering, what are they going to use AI on a Beatles record for? Like, what's up with that, right? But as we get here towards the bottom, and what's interesting for me personally is that I'm on the fence. I'm literally in the middle. I'm excited and I'm scared with AI. And so is Paul. You know, he says it right here. It gives you some sort of leeway. So there's a good side to it and then a scary side to it. We'll just have to see where that leads.
Exactly.
So, but like for me, this is like, because, you know, people will always say, these young artists are this, that. We used to do it like this. And look, this is one of the veterans, probably the biggest, you know, songwriter of all time. I'm not just saying that. I don't know if he is or isn't. And they're not afraid to use it, you know, or maybe they had no choice to use it. But anyways, before I get ahead of myself, so he's like, it has great uses, he says here. So when we came to make what will be the last Beatles record, it was a demo that John had that we worked on. And when we finished it up, and we've just finished it up, sorry. It'll be released this year. We were able to take John's voice and get it pure through this AI. So we could make the mix as you would normally do. So I'm assuming, you know, like now you with technology, you're able to take out the vocals, remove vocals, or backing tracks. You know, you just want the drums or remove the guitars. So they're starting to do that. And I guess they just wanted to be able to have John's voice separated to properly mix it into the music. I'm speculating. That's, you know, I don't think
that's what it sounds like.
Yeah, but like maybe I don't know. Like I wouldn't want to say that they took the lyrics, punched it in, and make sound like John Lennon. Maybe they did. I don't know, but we'll figure that out.
Yeah, well, it sounds like more like an assistive AI thing, and I think there's been a lot of conversation on that, but between assisted AI versus generative AI, where it completely comes up with something on its own, and that's kind of what I was thinking when I first heard of this, Joe. I figured it was going to be like a Tupac hologram, where Paul McCartney was going to be singing with a completely, AI rendered version of John Lennon, but that doesn't seem to be the case. I also didn't realize that AI was used in Get Back. That's actually news to me from this article as well.
I to be honest, like, we're just sort of reading this as we go, but like he does say it here. So all of that is kind of scary, but exciting because it's the future. And when we were able to use that kind of thing, when Peter Jackson did the film Get Back, where it was us making the Let It Be album and was able to extricate John's voice from a ropey little bit of cassette. Where it had John's voice and a piano. So, see, I love it. We didn't even know. It's
insane. That just shows how seamless it is. They say that eventually it's going to be that seamless, but it looks like it may already be. This is cool, though. Paul McCartney, definitely a guy who stays on the curve when it comes to music. Some guys are ahead of it. Some guys just move with the tide. And I feel like Paul McCartney knows when the time is right and he strikes. He's worked with everybody from, recent icons like Rihanna and Kanye West, making big recent radio hits. So this guy knows how to stay relevant and he knows where music is going. So I would say that to take heed, because this means AI is going to be big.
Yeah, I don't. It's like the cat's out of the bag, the toothpaste is out of the like you can't get it back in kind of thing. And another quote, he was told that there was a lot of unauthorized Beatles tracks. A number of AI powered sound-alikes are continuing to make waves on YouTube and elsewhere. And he said this very interesting.
Very interesting. Now that would be quite a video. Paul McCartney reacts to AI Beatles tracks.
Yeah, hey,
we got to get him on SoundMojo for that.
How do we know? How do we know? Because there's always that rumors of, is this the real Paul? Is this an AI Paul saying this stuff? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, maybe it's AI Paul reacting to AI.
That's what I'm saying. So like, I'm thinking this is like, this is where it gets scary, right? Who do you trust? Do you even know who's talking to you? Deep fakes, all that stuff. It's just insane.
I'm actually not even here right now. This is a deep fake as we speak. So easy work day today.
I don't even think AI would want to personify me. It's like, so I don't think that, so it's the real deal over here right now. But last little thing I saw here is we had mentioned about Grimes, right, with AI and stuff. And
yes,
she was
couple
like
shows
saying,
back.
So here it says TuneCore basically unveiled plans to vet and distribute tracks featuring Grimes AI. So that's definitely something we're gonna have to keep an eye on as well.
Okay.
Do we keep an eye or do we keep an AI? Oh boy.
Keep it. Oh, but
there's a dad joke.
He came in swinging like a wrecking ball. I love it. Let us know what you guys think down below in the comments on AI in music. Rush veteran Alex Lifeson is back with a brand new project, and this is really cool to see, Joe, because I think Rush fans are definitely in for some new music from at least one member of the band. I think they've been waiting for this. Alex Lifeson's group Envy of None has released the animated music video for their latest track, That Was Then. The EP is called That Was Then, This Is Now, and it dropped on June 9th via K-Scope Records. And this is really interesting, Joe, because a lot of people might expect this to be sort of a prog rock takeoff of Rush, but really this is definitely the opposite of that.
Yeah, this wasn't even on my radar. I guess when I see like pictures of Alex, I automatically think it's something about Rush or like it's another interview or something. But no, I didn't even know this. So this is a pleasant surprise. I actually checked out the EP before, and they've had something released even in 2022. So he's been going at it. He hasn't, he's not like taking much vacation. Let's just say.
Definitely not.
But definitely. Don't expect it to be Rush, that's for sure. Don't expect it to be Rush. It's definitely not Rush. Maybe there are elements, you can tell some of his guitar work and stuff, but it sounds very, I don't know, the impression I got like off a first listen, I've only had one listen, was almost like sort of ambient, electronic, kind of rockish stuff. Mm-hmm. So, that's just my first listen, literally impression. But, I like the fact that sometimes, I remember back in the day when like Dream Theater, when they finished their tours, they would all do these crazy solo albums or projects with other musicians. but it would just be more prog, or probably even more intense prog, like not as song oriented, more shredding and stuff, which kind of is like, it's cool, but at the same time, this is sort of what I appreciate. Show me something else. Like, show me another...
instead of your version of a Dream Theater song if the rest of the band was gone, basically.
Yeah. But it's okay. Like, that's cool, too. You know, there's some stuff I would definitely like about that. But this is, like, a good approach where it's, like, songwriting, again, different, completely different to Rush. So, now that I think about it, I remember buying on CD back in the 90s another solo project I had done called Victor. And, that had gotten some airplay here. That's how I heard about it, and I really enjoyed that album as well.
That was a band, or was that just him?
I think it's him and another. I forgot the name of the artist. Another Canadian artist, Dal Bello, I think her name was at the time. So it was probably a collaboration project of both of them. I don't know who else was in the band. I can't remember right now. But that's Alex for you, man. He's always busy, always, always experimenting, pushing himself in different directions. Just doesn't rest on his laurels, as they say.
Yeah, it's great to see the fact that he's actually going for it, and he's not letting Rush be the end of his musical career. I mean, look, it's good to see that a guy is not going to let himself just be defined by the one band. And ultimately, when you have that love of music, I feel like it's going to keep pushing you forward. So congratulations to Alex Lifeson. I definitely wish him all the best. And let us know down below if you're going to be listening to his latest project. Hopping over to the SoundMojo Community tab. Of course, this is the spot on our YouTube page where we post different polls, different quizzes, and different questions to find out what our listeners are listening to when it comes to the world of music. Make sure to go subscribe on the YouTube channel as well to be part of these votes. Here we ask Katy Perry versus Dua Lipa.
Our audience picked 61% for Katy Perry, 39% for Dua Lipa.
This sounds about right to me. I would say about 60-40 is a good average. Katy Perry, an established artist who has managed to carry her fan base on from, the early 2010s up until now. And honestly, Joe, an artist who I'm sort of surprised at her tenure.
100% agree with you, man. Like, I just think, she has a longer career, probably more singles under her belt, let's say, than Dua Lipa. Having said that, man, Dua Lipa just keeps knocking it out of the park with every release and just better and better and better. So 60-40, I would say that's a fair.
I could definitely see Dua Lipa becoming bigger as time goes on, though. I feel like maybe in Europe she's bigger, but definitely still growing in the United States and Canada. Let us know what you think down below in the comments. Here we ask, pick your favorite 70s progressive rock band. King Crimson, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Yes, or Rush.
Our audience picked 13% for King Crimson, 6% for Emerson, Lake and Palmer, 12% for Yes, and a resounding 68% for Rush.
Rush was the only answer that was really going to win this, right? Because I feel like prog rock and Rush just goes together like PB&J.
Well, I think so. Like, I'm not surprised at the results, maybe at the landslide of the results. I'm personally, like, I think I voted Rush because that's probably the one I listened to the longest and enjoyed, but I'm a huge fan of Yes. Love King Crimson. Emerson, Lake and Palmer, I have a few albums, but like, I know the main sort of, if you want to call them hits. But yeah, definitely not a band I got into. There's just too much of a catalog with Rush, Yes, and King Crimson to have time for anyone else.
King Crimson, I would expect it to have at least taken 20%. I'm sort of surprised that, like you said, Joe, at the landslide of this, King Crimson, sort of a prog rock fans sort of niche band, I would say. Once you get a little bit deeper into it, I feel like you would definitely get to know them. But this just goes to show that Rush is the good old staple, and maybe people just go with what they know. So Rush taking this poll by a landslide. Of course, if you missed the vote, let us know what you think down below in the comments. Now it's time to hop over to our guest segment for today's show. As mentioned off the top, we're joined today by Laila Biali talking about her brand new record, Your Request, which is out everywhere now, with her versions of interpretations from the Great American Songbook. And this is cool, Joe, to talk to a classical, traditional jazz instrumentalist. This is a little different than our typical approach on the show.
Yeah, I always try to bring in different. We had Thompson Egbo a couple episodes ago. Again, also jazz, fusion-y, piano jazz. This was definitely cool to see, like, because she like polled her audience, right, to like pick the favorite songs, and then like I'll pick the ones to do, you know. So, and she also, I love, well, I don't want to ruin it. Why there were her reasons. One of her reasons why she did sort of like a covers album, you know. So we'll let her answer it in the interview. But what were your impressions of her?
I thought it was great. You know, she was the utmost professional. She had a clear vision and goal for her music. And, you know, obviously the host of Saturday Night Jazz as well on CBC Music National. And so, you know, it just goes to show her love of the music goes very deep. She's very knowledgeable. You know, she's a mother, she's a wife. She definitely is busy in life, but she definitely makes time for the music as well. So it's good to see. And I'm looking forward to bringing you guys this conversation. So let's hop into the guest portion of today's show. We'll catch you guys afterwards.
You're my favorite work of art.
You are my funny Valentine.
Well, thank you for taking the time. The new album, Your Request, this is really interesting. You know, I've seen you doing a lot of press. I've seen you, you know, definitely hyping this up. What can you tell us about this brand new project? This has to be exciting.
It is exciting. I mean, for me, it's different. For your typical jazz singer, singing songs from the Great American Songbook would be nothing new. But for me, I actually am better known in Canada and I suppose elsewhere as an original artist. So for me to take jazz on fully in this way and unabashedly is actually, it's new territory for me, even though it you know, it's in some ways also my roots. I went to school for jazz and so it is exciting, very exciting.
Yeah. So maybe take us back a little bit with that. Was jazz the very first music you fell in love with? And when exactly did that come into your life?
No. So classical music was definitely my first love. I wanted to be a concert pianist. That was my dream. When I was 15, I was writing letters to piano competitions around the world. I had this D-ring binder.
Nice.
Stuffed, overflowing with these competition letters and their responses. And I was too young in many instances to compete. So, you know, lofty goals and aspirations, but that I injured my right arm accident. And so at that point, the classical dream was essentially dashed. And it happened to coincide with my introduction to jazz. And so I was mostly playing with my left hand, which was super awkward and hard emotionally and psychologically. But I think there was something about jazz that even as I was resisting it somewhat, spoke to me. And that is the community element, the idea that, you know, you, instead of just practicing for hours by myself in a room with a piano, with jazz, you know, it comes to life when you come together with other musicians and you create something as a collective that will never be repeated. And so I think I was drawn to that even while I was resisting it.
It's true. I never thought of it that way. Like, it's true with classical, it's like even though you play in an orchestra or ensembles, but the practicing is alone. Whereas jazz, it's true. I never thought of that. Whereas jazz is more of a community band vibe and stuff. Yeah,
it is. People will still practice for hours on end by themselves, but I think that there's practicing in the doing when you're together on stage or in a practice room together or at a rehearsal, whatever it may be, or in the studio. You're always feeding off of one another. And that's something that is so integral, in my opinion, to the genre. Although, of course, you also have solo artists. But for me, it was a new experience.
Yeah, in jazz, it's customary to be able to stretch out, whereas in classical, it's very more rigid.
Oh, yeah, you're reading the notes on a page, unless there's instructions, and that would be rare. I mean, I suppose in new music, like newer forms of classical music, there might be a composer who says, okay, everybody improvise, or here are some notes, do something with them, right? Almost as like an experiment or something kind of that pushes boundaries.
But it's rare.
But it's rare. And for me to get off the page, Cassius, and start improvising initially was not emancipating. It was terrifying. It's like, well, now what?
Exactly.
Somebody tell me what to do.
It's like
new territory.
There's no net, right? You just got a leap of faith.
That's exactly right. And you fly or you fall or both. And then you realize that the band and the audience, they're actually there to catch you, you know? And that's awesome.
So in terms of finding those people to play with, I mean, how long was it until you sort of found a group to sort of start rehearsing with and fleshing these ideas out? Did it take long?
Well, when I was at college at Humber College in Toronto, you know, my fellow students were my bandmates, and eventually we graduated together and we were still playing together. But it was when CBC Records approached me about doing an album for CBC Radio 2, like kind of that fit with that format, now CBC Music, but as part of their label branch, that I was tasked with putting together kind of a Canadian jazz supergroup. And there was this young drummer, Larnell Lewis, who I had heard of and worked with a couple times, and I just knew I wanted him in the group. And so it was super intergenerational. And George Kohler, who's now, you know, the bassist I work with the most, he was on my list, and they formed the core band of Your Requests, along with my husband Ben, who takes some of the drumming responsibilities, you know, on the songs that Larnell doesn't play. And that was back in 2007 when I found those guys. I mean, it was prior to 2007 that I had worked a bit with Larnell, but that was the first time the three of us, me, George, and Larnell, in the context of a group, played together. And there was just like an instant simpatico. It was like instantly worked.
That's amazing. So did you know right away you wanted to go to school for music?
It's a complicated question, because from as young as I can remember, was totally charmed by music and the power of music, all styles and genres. I mean, I mentioned classical music as my first love, but I loved Michael Jackson just as much. And I liked U2 because that's what my sisters were listening to. And a few bands that I would now be too embarrassed to admit that were like, the flavor of the decade. But I wanted to go to classical. I want to go to Juilliard or Curtis Institute, some of the best classical institutions in the US. But when I injured my arm and I was 15, just at that point, I changed career trajectories in my head. I loved sciences. I excelled in school. I did well in math. And so I actually got a scholarship to go to UBC, University of British Columbia, for science. And it was going to cover all 4 years. So, you know, in terms of having that taken care of, which is something I think a lot of parents dream of for their kids, I was set. But instead, I took this total left turn into jazz. I got offered a scholarship as well to go to Humber College for jazz. To be totally honest with you, I think they needed more women in the program. And I was still mostly playing with my left hand, but they heard me at a music festival. And I think they saw something in me as a musician. And I remember them calling me. They called me to offer me a spot in the program. And they said, well, do you sing? And I was like, kind of. And so they suggested I go as a singer. And I did. And I felt completely like a fish out of water. But now, as you know, that's a big part of what I do. So I suppose that was a silver lining.
Did you ever picture singing? Yourself singing?
I loved it. I mean, I would go around the house belting opera when I was a kid just for fun. So it was like what my mom played on Sunday mornings to get out of bed to go to church, like to force us out of bed. It would be like from downstairs in the kitchen.
That'll wake you up.
The smell of pancakes wafting up. Yeah. So
You're reminding me of my growing up, being forced Sunday mornings, wake up early to go to church.
Exactly. Yeah. Must be a generational thing, right? Yeah. So I loved singing. My sisters all sing. I mean, nobody is formally trained, but we just loved to sing together. And speaking of church, you know, the Biali sisters were kind of legendary at Christmas Eve services.
Nice.
Because we would harmonize, and my mom is German. And at one point in the service, at the very end of the service, everyone would light candles, and we would sing Silent Night, which is originally a German carol, Stille Nacht. And we would all sing Stille Nacht, me and my sisters, but we were probably the only people in the congregation who spoke German. So everybody else would be quiet, and it was just our voices. together in harmony, which, I got to be honest, felt kind of magical.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So it was always sort of in you guys' range of what you could do, but you never really considered like being a full-on singer.
No, definitely not. I landed there kind of by accident,
Wow.
I'm curious now what was your first experience like singing live in front of people?
Terrifying.
Yeah.
Of course, right?
Terrifying. Yeah, because like I remember when I was 13, this is before the injury. I was in middle school and I loved the music theater program. I was drawn to it. And I auditioned for Little Shop of Horrors. And I just wanted to be one of the doo-wop girls. I wanted to be like
Nice.
in the Little Shop of Horrors, that group. But instead I got cast as the lead, Audrey.
Oh, wow.
I got to wear a blonde wig. It was very fun, but it was terrifying singing in front of audiences. We had a few shows and my peers, and it was like baptism by fire. I had to get comfortable with it pretty quickly. But, even to the present date, I still have times where I struggle with my nerves. And I know I'm not alone because even the great Barbara Streisand had like gripping stage anxiety, and it's less so for me now, but yeah, it was the first few times I sang publicly were not easy.
Yeah. I think like the nerves is a good thing in the sense once you get over that point at the stage you're at now, where it's like it just means you care. I find it just means like you want to do a great job.
That is so well put. And my sister, the doctor, who's now a coach and a speaker, she specializes in mental health, but like she would say the same thing. Sometimes emotions and hormones, like adrenaline, the things that we might say are negative, we see them as negative things. You actually can see it from a different angle, as you just described, that ends up being helpful and productive. I feel this way because I care. And the fact that I feel this way within reason gives me an edge. So let's go with it,
Yeah, that's it.
No question. It is definitely about that work ethic and performance ethic. You mentioned your injury to your arm and how that affected, to a great degree, what type of music you were able to do. I'm assuming you fully recovered from that, or it took a couple years?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So how did that factor in? It sort of limited you for a while, and then your full sort of mobility with your arms came back. I mean, what was that process like?
It's so interesting. I'm a real believer in the mind-body connection, and I always had a sense that, what's happening in our brain and psyche does impact how our body feels and even the capacity to heal somewhat. But I really witnessed it firsthand when I was struggling with this arm issue, because it just persisted. And I saw everybody under the sun when I was in college, and it just would not get better. And it was when I stopped obsessing over it and worrying about it, when I actually just accepted, okay, so it is what it is. And I have to stop grieving that, I'll never get back to what I was, and accept that this is something I have to deal with now in my life. And funnily enough, as soon as I did that, the injury basically vaporized.
Wow.
No attention was given to it, right? So it just
isn't that fascinating? And yet,
that is.
And I had been clinically diagnosed, like it was not in my head. I'd seen, neurologists, I'd seen overuse syndrome experts, and they were all like, "Yep, we can feel there's something going on with your body." So there was damage, but when I stopped worrying about it and just started enjoying myself more again, poof, all better.
Interesting.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's definitely fascinating, and I mean, it also goes to show how music and performance can be, therapeutic to a degree. And I'm sure many people, can attest to that, because we've heard of that for years.
Absolutely. And I think that's a bit of a conundrum for musicians because, I just got back from this complete whirlwind tour of Europe that was hard. It was really hard on my body. It was hard on my health, no question. But it fed me, like it gave me more than it took away. Right. And so every time I come back from a tour of this nature, especially as I advance in years, people are like, how much longer do you want to do this? Do you really feel like this is sustainable? Have you thought about teaching? I get that a lot. And I just say, the road for me is like the lifeblood of what I do. It's the call. I feel like sharing music in live performance in real time with live audiences, like that's fundamentally what I'm designed to do and where I am most filled. So yeah, music heals.
Yeah, 100%.
Pack up all my caramel, here I go, singing low. Bye bye blackbird. Where somebody waits for me, sugar sweet, so is he. Bye bye blackbird.
When you perform, are you like aware of what's going on as you're performing, looking at people, or is it just like you get on and you're off?
No, I'm very aware. So
Oh, yeah.
I realize I'm a different type of performer that way. There are performers who go into a zone the way that an athlete goes into a zone, and it's almost like they're like, it's trance-like or something. They're tapping into a part of their brain and perhaps a part of what's happening, you know, if you want to speak metaphysically in the world, in the universe,
Flow state.
Right.
Yeah. But for me, I'm super rooted. I mean, I'm in my primal brain. I'm not in my executive brain. I'm not thinking, but I'm keenly aware of the audience, and I'm keenly aware of my band and what's happening. I'm always reading the room. I do look the audience in the eye if I can see them regularly. And I always try, I hope I don't make people uncomfortable. But it's just meant to be a warm connection. And in some ways, cheesy as it may sound, I want them to feel seen. Like I want them to feel, it's not just, hey, look at us, we're here, we're playing at you. It's like, no, this is like a beautiful exchange that's happening right now, that I think can impact everybody in the space. And yeah, there's like a circuit between the musicians and the audience. And it's just, speaking of flow, right? It just flows. And so I'm like plugged into that circuit and aware of who else is. And that, of course, includes the band and the audience.
Yeah, I know, like as a member of the audience and watching, when someone connects with me, it's like you feel it. You know that person was looking at you, and it makes you feel much better. So
I'm glad to hear that, because I've wondered sometimes if it makes people uncomfortable. I'm careful not to like
exactly.
stare at somebody in the audience.
Put some pressure on.
No, but just, it's like sometimes you're just doing a little run and you look at someone, a little smile, and I find it makes a big difference.
Yeah. We're there for the audience. That's my opinion. I think we're there to serve.
100%. So, you mentioned the tour through Europe, which must have been incredible. What were the biggest challenges of that tour? Was it just the constant traveling? Was it, and maybe the time zones as well? Yeah. Yeah.
Back-to-back shows with only one night off. And it was a super long travel day with 3 or 4 train rides and schlepping our stuff all over creation. So it's that combo. It's when you have a rigorous travel day where there's cancellations and delays, and it had happened a lot this tour. Thank God we didn't miss a single show, but and then you have to show up at the gig and maybe you haven't had a chance to eat or get ready properly. And it doesn't matter. You can't make excuses when you get on stage. Once you're on stage, again, you're there for the audience. And so you just bring your A game. And that is energizing and exhausting at the same time. And then, you go to bed late, you wake up early, and rinse and repeat. So yeah. So I'd say that's the toughest element. And I do, I'm fairly candid with my community. I've got some health challenges, so that adds complexity, because often, I'm having to follow some sort of medical regime or that makes it more uncomfortable to tour or not be at home. But those are things that I've now accepted. And as long as I'm not being irresponsible, they don't hold me back, because I just, I have such a hunger to be out there and connect with audiences.
So you put so much more into it than people might, anticipate, right? I mean, that's it. So it has to mean a lot to you then, the road, because it's not an easy thing.
It really does. And someone just earlier today asked me that question. Hey, have you thought about teaching? Have you thought about alternatives, alternate career paths? And And I was like, I haven't, you know.
Mhm.
Teaching is wonderful and I love it. And I imagine that someday I might sort of settle down and teach at a local college or university. And that might be a bigger piece of what I do. But for the moment, you know, I've got the radio host thing and then just creating music and being a mom, right? My kid's turning 13.
Nice.
Those are like the priorities for me. But touring is really, it's what I love most, for sure.
When autumn leaves start to fall.
And of course, the CBC show, Saturday Night Jazz. Maybe if you could talk to us about that. How long has that been part of your life?
I'm coming up on 6 years.
Wow.
Huge.
Nice.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
It's weekly, right? Right?
It's weekly. It's 4 hours on Saturdays.
Wow.
And we
Nice.
do often have to pre-record, which, you know, the audience doesn't love to know.
Yeah.
It feels more immediate when it feels like it's in real time. But because of my schedule, it's just something that we can't get around. And CBC is okay with that. So that works really well. And I love it. I really love it. You know, it's just another perspective. And I say this all the time when I get asked about hosting a radio show. When I'm performing, I feel like I'm inviting people into my space, but when I'm hosting, I feel like they're inviting me into their space. And that has always felt like a real privilege and almost sacred ground, I would call it, because it's amazing. Like whether somebody is listening intently or just has you on in the background, I love that we get to be a part of people's day. You know, it's like a really cool thing. Yeah, I love it. I love it. And can I just say that some of the best music across genres, but especially in jazz, comes out of Montreal and Quebec.
That's true.
I don't know what is going on in that province, but it's incredible.
Well,
From the
yeah.
Francophone and Anglophone communities, it's amazing.
Yeah, like in almost any genre, there's just always somebody here, something going on here. But Toronto too. I mean, like you guys have the superstars, right? The Drakes, the Weekends, and all that.
Oh, for sure. But
Yeah.
creatively, like there's just an edge that
Yeah.
Montreal. Yeah, right, Cassius? There's
Oh
just an
my gosh,
edge
absolutely.
that Quebec
Yeah, as
artists
an
have.
Alberta boy, I could definitely see that. I mean, where would you recommend somebody, if somebody was to ask for the number one city in Canada, what would you guys recommend? Maybe I'll even ask Joe. You know, I'll ask
So
them
what are
both.
your criteria?
Yeah.
I would say for someone who says I've been doing music for a couple years and I want to make it big in Canada.
Oh.
Oh,
Well, if it's a make it big,
it's Toronto.
it's Toronto. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Fair enough.
No, but I mean, there's always been. Growing up, I played in the rock bands and all that stuff,
Yeah.
and like so, there's always been a Montreal, Toronto kind of clash. But I mean, like just at the rate Toronto was expanding, and then when you have the Drakes and all that stuff, I mean, But I mean, look, we had Celine Dion, right? Like we have a lot of people here as well, right? I'm drawing a blank on that indie band that was the last one I remember exploding there. but
Arcade Fire? Or?
That's it. That's
Yeah.
Oh,
it.
yeah. Good
You know,
one.
so-
That's
So there's a
fun,
lot,
yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, definitely. But it's tough. It's like anything else in music. It's just tough to get across, to get out there, I just wonder if like Beethoven had the opportunity to hear jazz, like what would it sound like coming from someone like him,
Oh,
I was-
man. I know. And I think so. Bach. Now I could be starting rumors here, but if I'm not mistaken, I think Bach would improvise. So there's like a connection. His fugue writing, like everything is so organized. It's almost mathematical.
Yeah.
Right.
But like, was it Jacques Lussier? Somebody took Bach's fugues and improvised on them. And
Wow.
then I'm pretty sure I remember hearing or reading that Bach himself would often improvise. And I thought, well, that's fantastic. Was he the original jazz musician? You know what I mean? Like it just, wow.
He's the godfather of many things. Yeah.
He
Yeah.
sure is. Yeah. And I mean, this is a little bit of a bunny trail. Right now, there's a big dialogue happening around the word jazz. And quite a few Black American musicians who I revere have been fighting to dispel the word, to get rid of it.
Miles.
And
Miles. Yeah, I remember Miles
Right,
Davis has been
exactly.
fighting about it. Yeah.
Exactly. And there's some folks that are still kind of carrying that torch forward. And they just, they would far rather it was called Black American music. So speaking about Bach as like one of the original jazz musicians, it feels almost blasphemous.
Yeah.
But I think what we're talking about is that spirit of creativity and the use of improvisation. And, classical music seems so fixed, but was it always? Once it's on the page,
Yeah, exactly.
and it's written out and it's codified, okay, yes, it is. But did Mozart? Yeah, you have to wonder, was it part of their process, right?
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Especially someone like Mozart. I'm sure like it was just like, I don't even, I'm so amazed at how they could hear an entire orchestra in their head, but just put it on paper, whereas even with a computer and all these sound libraries, it's like, well, how would I do this,
I know, right? It's just a level of genius. There's some real musical genius there.
So incredible. So, the latest record from you, Your Request, one of the coolest things about this is that you put out a call on social media for song requests, and you received just over 150 submissions. I mean, it's insane. So my question is, how did you narrow this down to the track list that we got for this record?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I looked for doubles. So out of the 150 plus requests that came in, there were a number of songs requested more than once.
Right.
And because this was so much about the people, I wanted to do something for my community online. I thought, well, where there are doubles, there is a higher chance that I'm going to, choose those songs, because it almost as if it was like a democratic process, right? We had more votes for Bye Bye Blackbird or Bye Funny Valentine. And otherwise, I just looked. It's interesting. I'm so intuitive about things. And so I just kind of looked through the list and I paid attention to what grabbed me, what immediately piqued my interest as an arranger, and just cracked open that door to arranging something new and fresh, and where I just had a sense of a possibility that existed. And of course, every single one of the songs requested would invite new ideas, but some attracted me more than others.
Yeah, well, like, I mean, there's a lot of like the standards, right? Like My Funny Valentine and Corcovado. So how did you keep yourself interested and fresh with it?
Yeah. Well, I tried not to get too precious about the process. So rather than telling myself, well, I'm going to reinvent the wheel, it's like, no, I'm just going to nip and tuck and change some things here and there. And there was pressure. Like I owe nothing like a deadline to keep you moving. So I am somebody who, possibly to my detriment, and I've been criticized for this by my dear friends. I move very quickly, and so I had us booked to go into the studio, while the ink was still drying on the arrangements, and some of them we didn't even rehearse. We just went. Like my favorite things, we were in the studio and I'm going, and it's a complicated arrangement. And it's like, okay, guys, here's what's happening, and you're on the clock. And so in terms of the arranging of the songs, I had that same pressure. In fact, I was on tour in Quebec. We were performing in Rimouski.
Oh, yeah.
And we had stopped just outside of Montreal. I think, is it called Brossard?
Yeah.
It was like on the way.
Yeah.
And I brought my keyboard, and my husband, God bless him, and I schlepped that keyboard into every hotel room. And I arranged Corcovado like right after I performed at Rimouski, the jazz festival. And like I arranged it that night before we packed up the keyboard, because we were going into the studio the next, 2 days later. We had to drive back through Montreal to get home. And then the next day we were going into the studio.
That's a long drive.
Nonstop too.
Yeah, and that's a little bit how I operate, which I think can stress people out, but it's just how I'm wired. And I think it does. Like I said, I wonder if I planned it a different way, would I get stuck? Would I get bogged down? Would I never get things done? I don't know,
I find if I think about it, then I'll shoot myself in the foot kind of thing. Like I'll actually get in my own way. Whereas if I don't think about it and just go, that's where flow state, like it's just do it, just get it done.
Exactly.
How long were you guys in the studio, like for something like this?
2 days. So we did one day in mid-April of 2022, right before flying to Europe for a tour, our first big tour since pandemic had hit. And then the following September, I wanted to grab a few more songs. And that was like a half day. They were both kind of half days. So like 6-hour sessions.
Wow.
Yeah, I know.
I'm always so
That's
impressed.
amazing.
I'm always so impressed with jazz musicians and like stuff like you guys just show up. It's like Miles Davis. I remember reading the book. You'd call everybody, and sometimes like guys, 2 bass players show up. Like, why are you here? Why am I here? Don't worry about it. And then they would find out. They just get set up, find out, and like, okay, here's the chords, here's the G, and okay, go. And it's like, all right, and improvise. Then we have all these like a master.
And you know what's fun about that? I mean, of course, I do think jazz musicians are uniquely equipped to make that work. But I think what's so cool about that approach is then you're all like, there's an energy and you're all really on point. George Kohler and I were just chatting about this while we were on tour together because he's on the album, of course. And I said, I wonder if I like rushed through things too quickly. And he's like, no, because here's what I'll tell you. And I don't say this with any arrogance. A couple people said to me, I think this is your best album yet. And I went, really? and the reason being, because I'm like, but we blasted through this. But it wasn't without care, and it wasn't without attention to detail, and without love and intention. And George said, he's like, you know what? We've all played together for such a long time, the core band. And we were all like really on our toes because we hadn't rehearsed at length. And maybe there was something about that ultimately elevated the music somehow.
That spontaneous energy.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Because
then you get into what I like to call analysis paralysis, right? Where you're like, every little thing, it's like, no, just get it done. Don't think about it. Move on.
Totally.
Because all that other stuff, all your playing, all your performance, all the like you said, you've been with these musicians for like 10 years. That's all subconscious. That just happens, like
exactly. And we can get in the way, it's so true. So not to say that there isn't, doing it the other way, like really letting songs marinate, taking your time with the production elements. We did that with an album that's kind of more indie pop rock that I released in 2015 called House of Many Rooms. And it's still the album I'm most proud of to date. It's a huge departure from jazz, and there's a gospel choir, and there's a horn section, and a chamber orchestra, and that one we really, we took our time with it. So it was a very different process, and I'm just as happy with the results. So I think it can go either way, I suppose. It's
like kids, right? Yeah. Like one is just one way, one is another way, but they came from the same place.
Totally. We call our albums our babies, right? So
that's it.
So per that, my husband Ben and I, we say that this is our 5th co-production, our son Joshua being our first.
I like that. You guys have both got production credits. So what was the most rewarding part, would you say, about fulfilling this record and fulfilling the song request from your fans?
I'm going to give you an answer that probably nobody wants to hear. Are you ready for it?
I'm ready.
This is the very honest answer. So one of my goals with this album, gentlemen, was to gain a little traction on Spotify. And so I was like, you know what? I know we all have conflicted feelings about Spotify and opinions about just streaming in general and what it's done to the music business and musicians. But I am adopting it fully. And I think it's a wonderful way to reach new listeners. And so my goal was with jazz standards and maybe some songs that were still kept a bit of an edge, but a little more palatable, and could potentially work better for an algorithm. I'd hoped I might get some playlists and just increase my reach. And that's happened. I, for a couple years had like 3,000 monthly listeners, and then I got to above 70,000. So for me, that was it's still peanuts compared to, artists who have millions and even billions of listeners. But for me, that was really satisfying because
Yeah.
that was the target, if I'm honest. It was one of the targets.
Yeah,
So
I like that though. I mean,
No,
you have
yeah.
to sort of adapt or you get left
Yeah.
behind, so to speak, right? In this world. So
if you got to play hockey, you need a stick, you need a puck. So it's like, if you have to play in this game, you have to navigate, you have to tour, you have to pay your stuff. Stuff doesn't just fall out of trees. So yeah, I know everybody
Exactly.
loves to hate it, but it's the game. We have to sort of play it.
And
So
I have to go ahead. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, I appreciate the honesty. Like, it's like we have to, you got to make this work.
Yeah, it's not a very romantic answer, right? So, it has been more satisfying to bring this music on the road and see how it connects with people live. That probably was the better and even more truthful answer to your question. But when you asked, I was like, ooh, well, for me, one of the big boxes I got to check was, an uptick in Spotify traction, and that for me was really meaningful because I kept releasing music, and I was like, nothing is happening.
Well,
Like, where are my people? And I could get critical acclaim and I could win a Juno and like all these other wonderful things were happening. And of course, those things are super meaningful. But I was like, where are my people online? Like, why is it so quiet over here?
yeah.
And so I just feel like there's more people now kind of checking out what I do. And that's exciting to me.
well, it's motivating. It's what it is, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, like we all, what was it? A few years ago, I remember reading it was 40 to 60,000 songs are released daily on Spotify alone.
Wow.
So it's like, and I always say, because like I have music just sitting here, and I'm like, people are telling, why don't you release it? Because but I will, but it's like it just feels like a drop in the ocean, But I still have to have your drop. You still have to do your drop, So
I know. It's like it's more easy than ever. The barriers have been removed. The gatekeepers have in large part been removed, and that's wonderful. The democratization of the music business, they call it.
Yeah.
But the flip side is that we now have a bit of a fast food culture around how we consume music.
Yeah.
And that's it's a bit
Hit and
fraught.
miss, right?
It's hit and miss. But what's beautiful is then you have, like, in the same way that we have the slow food movement, we've got vinyl making a comeback.
Yeah.
And so some people are going, well, yeah, so I like a burger now and then. I like to, I'll drive through McDonald's now and then. But you know what? There's this farm to table restaurant and they only serve 3 things and you're going to be there for 3 hours, and it's an experience. And so I feel like we have both happening now, and that's good.
I think it's
Definitely all about that balance, right?
Yeah. With all things, yeah, exactly. Yin and yang. I was always gonna say you can't have one without the other. Right?
Totally. And some of it is access, an issue of access. So if you think about it, and maybe we don't need to get too philosophical, but I look at what my son and his friends are listening to. And if not for Spotify, none of his friends would know who I am and what I do. And he blew my mind when he came home from school one day, because usually he's like, Mom, I hate jazz. I hate it. What's with this jazz you're playing? But he came home from school and he was like, Mom, my friends love your new single. And I went, sorry, what? Like,
That's amazing.
That's awesome.
which single rather? And it was like, because they got it on Spotify. How cool is that?
That's
Whereas
huge.
if they had to like go and buy it on vinyl, his 13-year-old friends aren't going to do that. So
Yeah.
there is an advantage to them being able to access it quickly and easily.
Definitely a massive advantage. So, that being said, what do you hope that people take away from this project when they have their first listen? What's your goal for that?
Well, I hope that those who've been waiting for me to do something that's truly jazz are a little bit satisfied. Okay, she's finally in one lane for an album. And then I guess I hope that people are excited about what they're going to request for the next one, because there's always going to be a focus. And this time it was Great American Songbook, but the next one might be prog rock, or it might be,
nice.
I have requests. If you have prog rock, I have lots of requests.
He'll send into some doubles. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Exactly. You'll get all his friends. I love it. Yeah. So the idea is to have a theme, a focus, so that people, get to sort of play the game and choose their favorite songs within whatever that context is. And then, of course, I do try to harness the music and bring it into the context of a jazz ensemble, jazz-ish, jazz-adjacent ensemble, because that is fundamentally such a big part of who I am. And so that's exciting. Like whatever the next thing might be is exciting to me.
I love that. The brand new project, Your Request, is out now. If you guys want to go check it out, click the link in the description down below. We have all the links to go connect with Laila, and we really appreciate you taking the time to come and talk to us today.
Thanks for having me on the show. This was super fun.
Thank you.
You're my favorite work of art.
You are my funny Valentine.
Huge shout out to our special guest, Laila Biali, for joining us on episode 123 of the Innersleeve Music Podcast. Make sure to go check in with Laila down below. The links are in the description on YouTube for all of her socials, as well as the album Your Requests. And as we learned, Joe, these really were you guys' requests, with over 150 song submissions sent in via social media. This is a big project.
Yeah, and like, again, in classical and jazz, like it's all about not perfection, but like you really like performing your instrument, so that it took them like 2 6-hour sessions to bang out all those legit sounding, like awesome sounding jazz, and then to tour it and all that stuff. Kudos to them. I think they did a fantastic job.
Definitely phenomenal job. And of course, make sure to go check in on your favorite streaming service. And also, while you're there, make sure to come tap in with the SoundMojo experience. We got a new name now, Joe, the Innersleeve Music Podcast. We're here every single week on the YouTube channel, youtube.com/SoundMojo. Thank you guys for helping us hit 34,000 subscribers, by the way. We really appreciate it, guys. Of course, here to hold up the independent artist community, as well as talk about some of the biggest names in music. So make sure to tell a friend, hit that subscribe button, and come and join us on the channel for all of the fun that we have in store. Also, check us out on your favorite audio platform, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio. We're available in audio form every single week for you to listen to the podcast on the go. So make sure to come check us out. Also, check us out on social media at SoundMojo. That's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Come say hello. We'll definitely respond to your comments, give you guys a like and a repost, whatever the case may be. We love hearing from each and every one of you in the SoundMojo community. Thanks so much for tuning into this brand new episode of the Innersleeve Music Podcast. We'll catch you guys next time.